Charges have been dropped against Robert Blagojevich, but former Governor Rod Blagojevich faces a retrial, and the date is set for this coming January.
To help us break down those Thursday developments and predict what's next, we're joined by our friend, legal expert, attorney Thomas Glasgow. Always good to see you, sir.
Good morning.
Big news yesterday. Why do you think they actually dropped that case against Robert?
When you have a trial and you have multiple defendants, the best thing that you can possibly do is to take defendants who dirty each other's up, such as in a mob case or in a drug conspiracy, and you have them all sitting next to each other. And it tends to have a cumulative effect of one bad guy sitting next to another bad guy, and then the jury looks at them and goes, well, they all have to be bad guys. In this case, it did completely the opposite. And Robert Blagojevich has painted himself as a credible, wonderful person who's a very sympathetic character, not only to us, but to people that are out there in the general public. He probably was one of Rod Blagojevich's best witnesses during the course of the trial, and therefore gave him a lot of credibility. And as you have heard and read, the jurors had a great deal of problems struggling over Robert Blagojevich's conviction because they were attempting to follow the letter of the law. However, they did not feel that it was the just thing to do.
And he's such a disciplined individual, too, and all this other stuff.
Correct, and it really comes across great. Lieutenant Colonel, former military man. Now we're going to look at something where the prosecution is probably going to be retooling everything so that it is more streamlined, and you're going to get into chronological order. When we had the the jurors on, they were talking about how complex the case was and how they had to jump around and had to create timelines. You're not going to see that in the second trial. You're going to see a very, very simple trial, very simple to follow, very simple timelines.
So with this next retrial coming up, you're kind of going over the details in the case. How about the lawyers in the case, too? How much is that going to play a part? Because now we're hearing that Sam, Adam, Junior and Senior, don't write them off just yet. We'll kind of wait and see what happens there. So what do you think? Is that going to be a huge part of this, too, to find out who the attorneys actually are?
I think so. I mean, you end up with 2 attorneys. That's it. That's all that's going to be paid for. And that's presuming that he files the affidavit so that he can get the financial aid from the government. Now, if that's the case, they're paid at a reduced rate. And as a practitioner, a case like this really sucks the life out of your practice. If someone ends up taking this case, the amount of time that you have to put into it in order to do it and do it correctly is monumental. And then when you get done with this, there is virtually no practice at the end to go back to if you're a solo practitioner. He had 7 different attorneys who could break up the work, who could, they could delegate who was going to take what and work on separate things. You could be an expert in one witness and then as a whole knowing the game plan. It's almost like having a football team versus having 2 people at a tennis match that are just doing doubles.
Right.
It strikes me as I was listening to this yesterday that if you're Rod Blagojevich, the ex-governor, yesterday's decision is a good news, bad news kind of thing. Good news because you love your brother and you're happy that he can move on with his life. But bad news because now they can concentrate solely on you.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, I really think that the focus now is going to be on Rod, and he's got to be feeling that heat. His strategy during the course of this has really been, since the inception of the impeachment, has been to go on and to basically testify without being cross-examined. If you remember, he never showed up for the hearings in Springfield. He just came, he gave his speech, he talked in front of everybody, no questions, he didn't allow anybody to cross-examine him. He went out to the press, he did the same thing in the press, he ended up doing this, nobody asked him any questions about this. He then goes, I'm going to testify, he decides not to testify. Well, why? He now does not get to be cross-examined. Nobody has put to him questions that are going to test his story. He's just come out and done his political thing. And whether or not he'll testify again, we don't know. But remember, prosecution can't comment on that during their closing argument. And they can't, and the jurors can't take it into consideration that he didn't testify, although he's testified everywhere. So will he continue this particular thing? I don't know. This pattern, it seems to have alienated a large number of the people out there. You only convince one person on 4 or 5 counts. As we say in the business, you only need one person on a jury to hang it, but still, it wasn't 11-1 the other way, it was 11-1 against him on several of these counts.
Very interesting.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
All right.